Legacy planning should only start in old age. Myth or facts?
That's a myth.
Hello everyone, welcome to Financially Focused with CardinalStone, where we break down important topics in Nigeria's financial markets and help you make smarter financial decisions. I'm your host, Oscar Romero, and today we're exploring a topic that sits at the heart of generational wealth. Yes, you heard that right, generational wealth. Today we're discussing family wealth, legacy, and the strategic decisions that preserve both. For many families, building wealth is one challenge. Preserving it across generations is another. How do you protect family harmony, prepare the next generation, and ensure that your intentions stand the test of time? From succession planning to trust, to estate structures and education funding, the decisions families make today help determine their future for many decades. To help us unpack this important conversation, I'm joined by Iyiosa Ediagbonya from CardinalStone Trustees, who works closely with families and institutions on wealth preservation and legacy structures. Iyiosa, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Oscar. Thank you for having me.
All right, so let's go straight to the big picture, right? For many individuals, for many successful individuals, people spend years building investments, assets, and businesses. Why is it often harder to preserve wealth than to create it?
Beautiful question. I think we're starting from the right place. Let me just first say this, that wealth preservation is much more than wealth creation. And a lot of wealthy individuals are a bit more fixated on creating wealth than preserving wealth. And then the road from creating wealth to preserving wealth is longer. And I'll explain what I mean. It includes creating wealth, it includes tax efficiency, it includes estate planning, it includes family management, people management. So there are different legs, to wealth preservation. And so if you really want to preserve wealth, you must be thinking more than just creating wealth. Again, it's a lot more than market dynamics. It's a lot more than interest income and all of that. Like I said, it's a whole journey that goes from wealth creation all the way down to preservation.
All right, interesting. So it means that the real risk isn't market performance, that, maybe the generation before you, they went to invest in something that nobody understands. The problem is the absence of strategic structures for continuity.
Absolutely. Structuring, if we pick that word, is a really big word it's a really important word when it comes to wealth preservation. So it's a lot more than market dynamics. You're correct.
All right, so let's move to another. A lot of people hear the word trust and they think it's for only, ultra high net worth individuals, high net worth families, trust fund kids, trust fund. You just hear the word, and some people's goal in life is to just, get married to a trust fund family. but really, what role do trust actually play in preserving wealth and legacy? All
right, let me make it a bit more granular, right? A trust is a type of an estate plan. So a trust is an estate planning tool, right? A trust is a legal arrangement that involves three parties. The first party is a settlor, the person who sets up the trust. So this individual transfers assets to a trustee. The trustee holds and manages the assets for the beneficiaries of the trust, right? Three parties: a settlor, the trustee, and then the beneficiaries. The goal is that at the end of the day, the trustee will be able to follow certain dynamics, follow certain instructions that have been detailed in a trust deed, right? So if you'll allow me, please, small scenario, right? Engineer Lagbaja, right, has grown his assets, right? He has worked for a number of years. He has grown his assets. Now he has a running business, a very successful business, oil business, right? For example. And then he has a family. He has 2 wives and 5 children, right? What Engineer Lagbaja is trying to do now is to ensure that beyond creating wealth, he wants to set up a trust that will hold his assets and manage his assets for the benefit of himself and his beneficiaries. So a trust is that arrangement that helps engineer Lagbaja achieve all this whilst preserving the assets themselves, that is the value of the assets, family dynamics, and then continuity of both relationships and the business.
Interesting. So beyond just distribution, trusts actually help to protect the intention of the individual, the family.
Yes, it does.
All right. So one major challenge that families face is conflict after the wealth creator is gone, right? How can strategic planning actually reduce dispute? We know about stories where, Uncle Lagbaja goes and takes his nephew and puts something in the land. How can strategic planning that we're talking about, how can it reduce this kind of dispute?
All right. I'd like to say that strategic planning, it goes beyond what is in the mind of this wealth creator, right? It goes beyond what's in his mind all the way to documentations for structuring, right? And I'll tell you what I mean. Remember, I mentioned that a trust is created, right, to be able to achieve the purpose of estate planning, right? When you create a trust, there's typically a document, a trust document. It's called a trust deed, right? Now, beyond a trust deed, there are other documents, right, that spell out the intention of, I'm not sure why we're using Lagbaja, but let's continue, right?
No, you can change it, you can switch it.
Okay, right. Let's say Engineer Abiodun or Dr. Abiodun.
You like engineers, okay, doctor now. Let's talk about doctor.
Well, let's talk about doctor, right? So now, Dr. Abiodun wants to put a structure in place, right? It is very important that he engages a professional trustee. I mean, because we're talking about a trust. He engages a professional trustee who would ensure that the language of the document that spells out this structure is as cleanly stated as it should be. And I explain what I mean. We're talking about family dynamics, and then how that we should be working towards not reducing the chances of disputes. So, for example, a professional trustee would ensure that the trust deed, a letter of wishes, a family constitution, right, is documented in such a way that we have explained. Now, let me read you something. For example, we're saying, Dr. Abiodun says, it is my desire that this hospital that I have, put up, I have managed myself, continue to be managed in so and so way, right? I realized that my first son, who I've given birth, who is my strength, or whatever language he wants to use, right, may not be interested in the medical field. He's a content creator, right? But I have a second son.
Like us here.
Yeah. Well, you can say so. My second son is my first son is a content creator, so I understand that he may not have interest in the medical field. But my second child is a doctor. And so I would like that he continues to manage the hospital. However, proceeds of this hospital or this facility should be distributed in so and so manner. In this way, my first son, who is not interested in this field, is not in any way put down or let down or pushed aside when it comes to what should accrue to him as a beneficiary under this structure. In all, what I'm trying to say is that structuring and the language of structuring is so important because, as we have correctly alluded to, wealth preservation is more than just wealth creation. It's even more than just creating a structure. It's about managing intention, managing perception, and managing relationships.
That's an angle I was even going to, because a lot of people think about wealth preservation as just about assets, but it's also important because it covers the preservation of relationships as well.
Yes, it does.
All right. So let's talk about legacy, because when we hear legacy, it's easy to focus only on financial assets, but legacy can be broader than that, right?
Yes, it can be broader than that. A legacy really is, I'll say that is your why, right? And we find out that a lot of wealthy individuals, let me also just put a little caveat here to say that estate planning is not just for the wealthy, right? Because it looks as though we've been talking about just wealthy people. Estate planning is a solution that can be offered to people across the entire wealth bracket, right? The dynamics will differ, of course, but it's not just for the wealthy. Now let's go back to what we're talking about. Now, for legacy preservation, like I said, your legacy really is about your why. There are a lot of individuals who, within the course of living their lives, within the course of doing their businesses and accumulating wealth, they found a reason to engage in certain passions beyond just family management, right? It is very possible, and it is, in fact, it is an advantage that an estate plan gives to you, that beyond managing assets and businesses and your family, an estate plan is also able to ensure that your legacy is preserved beyond you. We have seen, practically, I know of a very wealthy man who put in his estate plan that on my birthday, let so and so percentage of my estate be used to cater to the less privileged around the last house I lived. So on his birthday, for example, they call in caterers, they cook, they reach out to schools, they give scholarships and all of that, right? That's legacy preservation that can be handled and managed by your trustee, right? So we're not just giving, ensuring that first son and first daughter or wife or wives, are enjoying proceeds, but also going over and beyond to ensuring that preservation of legacy is achieved.
Well, I like that's a very fascinating angle. So legacy planning goes beyond just wealth. It's also about purpose.
Yes, it is.
Like you said,
yes,
the why.
Yes.
So what are some of the most common mistakes that families make when trying to preserve wealth?
We're going to go really far now. Right? I will be shaking some tables, but we'll touch on it. Common mistakes. I've seen a lot of misconceptions first that people have about estate planning, and this now translates to the actual mistakes that people are making, right? First of all, people say that I still have time. On my 70th birthday, I'll be calling my lawyer or a trustee and I will have my plan drawn up. How are we sure that this person will do up to 70? Right? So we have a misconception around time.
You're really shaking tables.
Sorry. How are we sure that this person will have that privilege of time? We have other people who have said that, my children are well studied, they studied in the best schools around the world, and then they love each other. So when I pass on, the love that they have for themselves will help them manage my assets well. I've seen situations where just at the slight invitation to the table. Now, what I mean by that is now you have to call the shots. We're now seeing how that I'm the first son and you're the second. I call the shots and you obey type of scenarios come up, right? Whereas an estate plan would ensure that you're leaving nothing to chance or the interpretation of another person, right? You are spelling everything out in black and white as it should be. We also have misconceptions around the right estate planning tool. So we have people who have drawn up their estate plans, but they have not used the right tool. I'm going to touch this a little. We'll not go in so much, right? For example, where a person should be adopting the tool of a trust, they have written a will. A will is an estate planning tool, quite all right. But we've seen again and again that with a trust, you have more grounds covered than what would be covered by a will, right? We've had situations where people write wills, and then at the instance of this will being read when they pass on, some children are lifting up their hands and say, that's not my daddy's will. I don't believe that he would have written that. In fact, we perceive or we suspect that, he was under some sort of pressure to write it this way. And the moment a will is contested, everything in our estate stays as it is until we're done with this contention, right? So this individual knows about an estate plan, has chosen an estate planning tool, but really, is that the right estate planning tool that should be adopted? So these and more are the misconceptions and the mistakes that people make when it comes to estate planning.
Interesting. And this even links to something we touched on in our last topic, time value of money, because these issues are some of the issues that, quietly weaken wealth over time.
Yes. In fact, you allow me, let me just tell you something else that can happen, right? We've had situations where an estate plan is drawn, right? And then there are minors, with these children that are not up to 18 years as beneficiaries in this estate plan. And then this individual has now chosen maybe a representative or a guardian that is not very capable of managing the affairs of those children who are minors in the estate, right? So you see that you really should be talking to a professional trustee and ensuring that all the I's are dotted and all the T's are crossed, right? And I'd just like to say at this point that an estate plan is a journey. It's not an off-the-shelf type of solution. You opt for an estate planning tool and you continue to have conversations that ensure that this estate planning tool is watertight until the person is out of the picture. What I mean by that is demise.
Okay. So, I mean, for listeners who may not understand what trustees do, because you've talked about estate planning, you've talked about the tools, you've talked about the structures. Trustees are the helm of all of these. For listeners who may not know what trustees do, how does CardinalStone Trustees support families in this wealth preservation journey, like you said?
Thank you very much, Oscar, for that question. CardinalStone Trustees is a foremost trustee firm, in the estate planning industry. What we do is that we offer a service now, both estate planning advisory and then structuring service to individuals, to families, to institutions. And our objectives are long-term, right? To ensure that the intention and the instructions of the wealth creator is carried on from the first generation to the next, and then possibly generations after that, whilst managing the intricacies of investment management, and then managing family members, and then managing business concerns. So really what we do is all encompassing, like I said, from advisory to the actual structuring and then the management of the entire estate plan. That's what we do.
Interesting. So the trustee's role is to provide continuity, to ensure that there's discipline, and then to actually provide professional stewardship.
I mean, you can call us that. We're stewards, right? Just to ensure that long-term objectives are achieved. So
yes. And that word you said, long-term, I really like it. So when you think long-term, you think CardinalStone.
That's it.
So before we go, let's play a quick game, my favorite game.
Okay.
So I'll be making a couple of statements in relation to what we've just discussed, and you'll be confirming if they are myths or facts.
Okay.
So first statement, wealth automatically stays in the family once there is a will. Myth or fact?
That's a myth, right? Wealth does not automatically stay in the family, because there's a will. I think I mentioned, whilst we were speaking earlier, that even though a will is an estate planning tool, we've seen that there are downsides to a will, right? Now, I'm not trying to upsell a product over or a service over the other, but what we have seen is that when it comes to will writing or will drafting versus a trust, you are better in control having a trust than a will, because of the contentions that can come up with the trust, because of the assets that are in your name, right, at the time the will is being executed. And so there are certain taxes, estate taxes and all of that will apply on the assets that are, executed from that will. So having a will is not automatic that wealth will stay in the family, especially if we see that there are now contentions that come up from the beneficiaries of that will. So that is a myth.
So next statement, family conflict is one of the biggest threats to legacy preservation. Myth or fact?
That's a fact. I wish I could raise my voice to say that's a fact. Now, you realize that when it comes to estate planning, you're not just managing investments and assets, you're managing people, right? And so we've seen situations where family conflicts because of what people feel they should get, how people feel they should be taken care of under the plan. You realize that there is that tendency for, some sort of quarreling, fighting, bickering, and all of that, which is why really I'm saying that a trust is a better estate planning tool than a will. And then secondly, I mentioned that the language of the estate planning document, the testamentary document that governs the administration of the estate plan, should be put down in such a way that it's quite clear what the intention of the wealth creator was and how people should be managed under this estate plan. So yes, that's a fact. That's a fact.
Okay, next statement. Legacy planning should only start in old age. Myth or fact?
That's a myth. As you are young man, as I am, young man, we can already have estate plans. I like to put it this way. The estate plan is the base structure, should be the base structure that as we now grow old and then go on in wealth accumulation, there's already an underlying estate plan, right? So what that means is that as more and more assets are gotten, as more and more, investment and income and all of that, as the business expands, let it sit on an estate plan. And so we don't have to wait till we are old, because that's time and we're humans. There's no human being that has the advantage of knowing what tomorrow will bring, right? So estate planning shouldn't start at old age. It should start right now. It should start now.
I like that. So next statement, a professional trustee helps to ensure impartial decision making. Myth or fact?
Fact. A professional trustee, helps to ensure impartial. The truth is this: as individuals, we have our natural partialities, right? We have people who may prefer, second son to first son, or who may prefer business A to business B, and they want to make their distributions along those lines of bias. But when you sit down with a professional trustee, we're helping you see beyond, again, your bias, to see the big picture and then the long-term objectives, right? You don't want to just sit down with a friend or a colleague that also somehow shares the same bias with you. You want to sit down with a professional trustee who is unbiased by all standards and is able to help you see, like I said, long-term. Right, so yes, that's a fact.
This has been such a fascinating conversation, and I think the biggest takeaway is this: building wealth is one thing, preserving it is another.
Absolutely.
Right? The decision families make today can shape the outcome for generations.
Yes.
So before we conclude, what final advice would you give to families, to individuals listening right now, and like anyone that is just thinking about legacy and long-term wealth preservation?
All right, thank you. What I'll say is this: what you know about estate plan does not equate what you have done about your estate plan. We have people who they have so much knowledge about an estate plan, they have thought about it in their heads, they have decided, they have marshaled out the whole structure, but they have not actioned on an estate plan for themselves and for their families and businesses. And so my last words would just be: don't just know about an estate plan, don't just decide for an estate plan, take action, on your estate plan. Again, like I said, what you know is not as important as what you have done concerning your estate plan.
All right. Thank you, Iyiosa. Thank you so much for joining us today. And to our listeners, if you found this episode helpful, remember to share it with your family members, with business owners, with anyone you know that is thinking about building generational wealth, anyone that is thinking about legacy planning. Until next time, stay financially focused.